Right.
Go.
Good afternoon, everybody. So today I'll be talking to you about self-motivation and sound judgment. I'll be discussing those two leadership attributes, and then I'll be talking to you about, so the first part will be what they are. So I'll be going over what they are, how I think they fit into the MFS with their values, and then I'll be going over the part two will be my personal position with these principles and my development with myself and how I've gone about doing that. So each one's going to have a video, so I'm going to start with a little bit of video and I'm just going to talk about what self-motivation is. So just to begin with the quote, so a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. And we'll just talk a little bit about that when the video is finished.
Sorry. It's not a little wrap up.
2.1 million Australian adults smoke daily. If you're struggling to quit,
Jack Welch once said, change before you have to. How true that is. Championship leaders understand that in order to remain relevant and competitive, they must foster a culture that embraces change. When you think about the brands that have been around for 100 plus years, how they looked in the beginning is much different than how they look now. They changed. The brands they once competed with no longer exist. Why? They didn't change. Grace Hopper once said, the most dangerous phrase in language is, we've always done it this way. As the leader, you must relentlessly fight this mindset. Don't allow your team to focus on how things used to be, because used to be's don't make honey. Instead, focus on how things are gonna be. Gonna be's make honey. Gonna be's have a clear vision of the future, how they need to grow in order to become that better version of themselves. They understand constant growth requires constant change. Remember what John Maxwell once said, change is inevitable, growth is optional. Close your eyes and visualize what things will look like in 3 years. How will you need to evolve in order to meet that vision and be a front runner in your space when the time comes? What changes do you need to make? Start making those changes now. As the leader, you have the remote. If you don't like the channel you're on, nobody can change it but you. So stand up and change it. And don't be afraid of the naysayers. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, do what you feel is right, for you will be criticized anyways. Trust your instincts. Pursue your vision. Even if no one else sees it, just start the journey. The others will follow. And stay ready. New levels will bring new devils. But the higher you climb, the stronger you'll get. Take pride in being a professional problem solver as you rise. Remind your team that every change you make is an effort to get better. You don't change for the sake of changing. Like Jim Rohn said, life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. At the core behind every big change is a why. And that why is to get better.
Okay, so obviously that video is a lot just about simply self-improvement and actually moving forward with things and being willing to make change and develop yourself and your team. And why that's important, obviously.
Independent artists, my unstoppable hustle in music. Here's the truth. I've had my doubts. I'm not some born talent, and everything I know, I had to grind hard for. But I knew I had something real, a story that hits deep in emotion.
Positive.
That can't be faked.
Why that's important is because, and I think if we can go back to this slide, is it discusses doing things kind of behind the scenes and having people not realise what you're doing. And so essentially with self-motivation, it's that internal drive that prompts you to take action and pursue goals and tasks. It's that internal drive for you to move forward, help make decisions and help push people forward. What's important with this quote in relation to self-motivation is they will think that that they've done it themselves. And where that's important is having that intrinsic drive within you to make change and to do things and to be better. with the focus on your job role as a leader as opposed to what the external things are. So not being motivated towards so much what people think of you or your reputation or how good you look in front of people. It's about really what's actually the job, what's your job as a leader and your motivation to fulfill that role. So what's important as a leader is, especially in the MFS, is to help with teamwork, to help improve teamwork within your crew, which was obviously one of our MFS values. It is to work well in the community. So another one of the MFS values, which is important motivation, is to get out there with your crew and to actually work well in the community, engage with the community through key checks, through school visits, so educational visits, through how you interact with the public at jobs in general. So if you have a circumstance where you need to educate a public member on why they called 000, maybe it wasn't really appropriate that they called 000, is how do you engage with that person? And that all comes from motivation, is what you're there to do. What's your job role? Your job as a leader, your job is to lead your crew, your job is to help lead other people to make better decisions. How further self-motivation impacts the MFS, I believe, is obviously it helps with crew development, is that you being motivated to help develop your crew and not just sit back and expect them to work it out for themselves. It helps enforce good relationships because you're out there doing things and working with them. You're not just, like I said, sitting back in the office or sitting off to the side again, expecting them to work it out for themselves. And it's also and even on an individual end in the MFS, it's important to be motivated to actually help yourself, whether that be to seek help if you've experienced some trauma, whether that is your fitness levels, to be continuously training. It's very important across the whole aspect of it. So moving on to sound judgment. I'll just read out the quote and then I'll just play a little video on sound judgment. So objective judgment now at this very moment, unselfish action now at this very moment, and winning acceptance now at this very moment. All of all external events. Quick video.
I mean, my favorite quote from Marcus Aurelius, he says, objective judgment now at this very moment, unselfish action now at this very moment, willing acceptance now at this very moment of all external events. I mean, that's basically Stoicism in a nutshell. If you don't have to read Meditations, you don't have to read Seneca, you don't have to read Epictetus, you don't have to get a degree from Harvard in ancient philosophy to get any more out of Stoicism than that, right? It's like, look, see the world as it is for what it is. Don't put judgments on top of stuff. Be a good person. You have to take action. That's unlike be a good teammate. Be a good citizen. Be generous. Be caring. Don't be all about yourself. And then willing acceptance. I know people, that sounds like resignation, but what it's really about is like, instead of complaining about how things are, instead of feeling persecuted, instead of feeling like shit is unfair, or instead of feeling like you can go back and change the past, which you can't, accept it and then move forward. That's not the willing acceptance now at this very moment of all external events. He's not saying just accept everything as it is. He's saying like accept the facts and then turn it into something. He's saying you can still change the world, but you can't change what's happened in the past. You can't change other people. You can only focus on what you're going to do with the facts that are in front of you. And so, I mean, that quote is the essence of what I write about in my books. It's the essence of what Stoicism is. And like, I would defy someone to live by that quote and not see things radically improve for themselves.
Okay, so I actually find sound judgment, or I like to call it objective judgment, a little bit easy to talk about in self-motivation because I think it's really important and I think it's very clear. And one of the reasons why I picked both of these attributes is because I think that we're all good at these at certain times in our life. It's something that we can always be working on, like working on our motivation and working on our judgment towards things. So essentially sound judgment is essentially, it's being unbiased, it's being objective, seeing things truthfully for what they actually are, and focusing on what's controllable within your thought process towards things. So, for example, it's not allowing your feelings to come into your judgment too much. So obviously that's very normal. We get emotional about certain things, whether we're upset about how a certain crew member is acting, or whether we get excited about something a little bit too much, or how we feel like a job went. If you focus on the facts, you focus on the objective factual facts in that scenario, then that can help you make the best decisions possible, because you're not getting caught up and being compromised by your emotions, your feelings. You can stay a lot more, I think, more calm and collected if you just try and focus on the truth and the objective facts in the scenario. So that fits into the values. I think the two in particular I would say would be integrity and excellence. So obviously, to have sound judgment, you need to use good moral and ethical principles. So that comes into essentially integrity. So you're staying honest, you're staying truthful towards things, you're not twisting things to suit you. And obviously with the excellence, I just think how that fits in with the MFS value of excellence is it brings out, I think, brings out good behaviours. So by you focusing on what's really occurring. So for example, if you've got a crew member who's struggling at work, whether they're rocking up late or not participating appropriately, or what have you, if you focus on what the reasons are behind that, then I think you can get better outcomes, and you can have better behaviours, get better behaviours from that crew member if you can actually sit there and say, look, what's actually going on that's leading to these things, as opposed to just getting upset and complaining, or essentially bitching about somebody. So where this comes useful for leaders is, I think, first things first, I think it has a quite positive impact on stress. A lot of people get stressed around trying to force something that's just not there. So if you are constantly focusing on how somebody at work is upsetting you, that is going to cause stress. But if you, like we just spoke about, focus on what's causing that behaviour, whether that be a poor family life, or whether that be emotional, mental health struggles, I think that helps you take a step back from that and not let yourself get so emotional about it. So that's how I would say it impacts stress. Also, it helps adaptability, which is obviously important for leaders. So by having good judgment, you're focusing on the facts, which helps you stay adaptable, because you're not getting caught up in what you used to do, what you like to do. You're focusing on what is needed for the scenario. And obviously I back at least more professionalism, I think, because being more willing to adapt to scenarios, I think, is a lot, just looks more professional. I think it's something that helps us move forward as a service. So that's the positives in that end. So obviously that's going to, through us the MFS, that's going to help improve relationships, being more assertive and fair with your crew members. Obviously, because you are focusing on what the actual facts are in relation to something, as opposed to focusing on how you feel about it. And that will also help you develop strategies on through jobs and training. So having good judgment, obviously, good judgment is focusing on, or sound judgment is focusing on things like safety, what's required of you, what our operating procedures are. You're actually using certain methods that the MFS have developed to make good judgment on scenarios and moving forward in a positive manner. So the second part, I'm just going to discuss a little bit of with myself. Okay, so this is essentially in relation, we'll begin with self-motivation, so where I'm at. So with myself, I feel like I need to remind myself that what I do impacts the entire crew, and I think that goes down to the smallest things. So whether that be ensuring that when you get to work, you're ready to respond, that you've ensured that all your gear is covered, ensuring that you are focusing on what's required for that entire day, and not just floating through and just expecting everyone to pick up the pieces and you're just going along for the ride. Another part that also comes into not taking shortcuts, even from the smallest of tasks. I think a lot of people do this, but I think myself, if you let the smallest things slip, the bigger things will eventually start slipping. So if you don't write like neatly in the occurrence book, you if you're willing to let that slip, then you'll be willing to let something else slip, and then that can have like a snowball, like a butterfly effect. And I think it changes your whole attitude. And I think we can all be guilty of doing this, and I think I am. So that's one of the reasons why I've decided to pick self-motivation. So how did I actually, how to improve this was essentially being honest with yourself. So the first thing was honest with myself, what I need to do, which was like things like that, for example. And then making sure that I actually do them and not slacking off on, like I said, the smallest things, because it will eventually transition and carry over into the bigger things, which may seem more important because it's more seen by everyone else, but it's going to have a positive impact across that whole line, that whole train of things. So that's getting involved in organising activities and making suggestions. Whether can we work on like drilling wise? I suggested to one of my officers the other day, or could we look at getting the door entry prop in? That could be a bit selfish. We don't, I haven't done much door entry lately. But it's beneficial for everybody. Just think of yourself as it's good for everybody. So that essentially is showing more self-motivation to actually help improve your training, your development, which I think has a positive transition to everybody else as well. And it's just ensuring that that you're not sitting back and just, like I said, hopping on that boat and just going on ride with everybody else and just kind of following along with the lead. So that's why I made a promise to myself that I would start implementing good behaviours with the smallest things and making sure that will transition over into those bigger things. Do I feel that has been successful? Obviously, like it's one of those things that it's like you might not notice that success until later on because you're starting to make little small decisions as you go. But all in all, I do feel like as I'm getting more, but progressing through the fire service, I'm getting more involved. I think I don't sit back as much. I'm a little bit more, maybe sometimes opinionated in some things, which is probably a good thing because I did used to sit back a lot and I used to be a little bit quiet and probably maybe a little bit not scared, but like hesitant to say what I thought about things. And I think that has helped me actually speak up a little bit more. And hopefully that's for the best. And then looking at sound judgment. So where I'm at with that. So I have always had like a personal interest in style system. I've been like, reading it for a long time, and so I would like to hope like 9 times out of 10, we're not all perfect, that I tend to be okay with that. But we all are guilty of it, and of being a little bit maybe selfish in our feelings towards things and focusing on how it upsets us, and that can come out into how we judge others and how we judge scenarios. So I've just discussed, essentially you have to be honest with myself about not getting caught up in subjective opinion, not getting caught up in my feelings towards something, and actually looking at it and saying, look, are my feelings justified? Or is it just the scenario, like, it's not a scenario that upsets me, it is my feelings towards that scenario, and just being honest about that. So how do you do that? Well, you stick to the facts. What is the actual truth of that? And what's actually needed and required. It doesn't matter if you don't feel like doing something that day, you need to do it anyway because it is part of the job. So how to improve? So to improve that, you have to actually challenge your thought process. So I can't just, it's one of those things that you actually just have to do it in your own head. You have to actually challenge yourself. You have to almost become a second person on the inside and go, hang on a minute, should I be, you're wrong there. You might not, even because you don't feel like doing something, it's just not justified. You actually have to go about it, and actually say, I'm wrong in that scenario, I need to do this, because successful people do what they need to do whether they feel like it or not, and that's a very important part. Another thing I think really helped me was, and this is not just at the workforce, this is in general, is actually dealing with things when appropriate. Sometimes if you've got an objective or a scenario that needs to be dealt with, you need to wait for the right time to deal with that. It's not always beneficial just to deal with it when it hits you or when it comes up. Sometimes you actually have to plan ahead and be strategic about when you go about something. So one thing I've tried to do is actually write things down that I need to deal with, whether that be going over my SDF, whether that be talking to somebody about something and actually dealing with that when I feel like I'm most prepared to do that, or most in the right headset to do that. Because, like I said, we shouldn't just always just jump to things and just do it at the instant always. And in relation to whether I feel this has been successful for me or not, like I said, everything's still a work in progress, and it's something that needs constant attention. And that's one of the reasons why I did pick self-motivation and sound judgment, because I felt like that was something that we always need to be working on. And some people do have it a little bit better than others, but I think all people need to work on that from time to time. So that's essentially where I'm at with that. So does anyone have any questions for me, whether that be how they, any feedback on how I think I'm going, or any questions on, any more questions on self-motivation or sound judgment in general at all?
Do you think there's any way we could use those on a regular basis somehow to add in on a team basis? Do you know what I mean? So, because they're obviously great sections that everyone needs to look at, and we all fail to look at over times because we get too caught up in what we're doing day-to-day life and think we're okay and think we're not, and hence you almost need some of those qualities to actually even start. Is there any way we could like incorporate something like that for us to all take a moment out, like either in a meeting or something like that?
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas?
So in relation to being motivated to do things, I suppose one important thing I think, well, we as a crew get together a little bit, but maybe to have it a bit more formalised. So maybe during 9 o'clock news, maybe at the start of a tour, you could write down things that you want to achieve for that tour. I think that could be a good way, because then obviously it's written down, it keeps you accountable, because you've written down the tasks that you need to do, and you can clearly see what you need to do. It's not just thrown out in the air and then people forget about it 5 minutes later. So I think that might be a good thing that we could do as a crew.
I think it was well done, Chris. Well presented, and like Holly said, I think it's a good reminder for all of us with those things. And self-motivation, yeah, it is contagious as well. So like when people get shit, for lack of a better word, it spreads, and the opposite's true as well. But I think it's easier to spread that demotivation than the motivation. So you've got to work harder at that. Yeah. And to recognise those things, like those little things, that's very true. I personally try and do that, because sometimes like I might not want to shave, or I want to come out in my thongs or something, and I just have to check myself, because it's those, if you start doing those little things, exactly like you said, those big, all my Crocs.
Response sandals.
If we could get issued response sandals, I'll be the first to wear them. But since they're not, I have to put these boots on, and it's just little things like that I think you're right, and it's good to recognise. So I think you did really well.
Cool. All right, well, thank you very much for listening. Appreciate your time.